Beneath calm tides and glittering horizons, moments of peace twist into terror without warning. Boats splinter, divers vanish, and the sea turns from beautiful to brutal in seconds. From a shattered yacht off the coast of South Africa in 2025 to a colossal predator tracked in the Pacific the same year, each account deepens the unease. In this video, we'll uncover 6 chilling shark encounters that redefine fear itself. Off the rugged coastline of Gansbaai, South Africa, where the Atlantic and Indian Oceans collide in frigid currents, the waters had earned a reputation that preceded them. This stretch of sea, located roughly 170 kilometers southeast of Cape Town, was known locally as the Great White Shark Capital of the world. The region's unique geography created ideal hunting grounds for these apex predators, with seal colonies dotting rocky outcrops and deep channels allowing massive sharks to patrol close to shore. Tour operators had built entire businesses around cage diving experiences, capitalizing on the near guarantee of encounters with these ancient hunters. The waters were cold, nutrient-rich, and utterly unforgiving to those who underestimated them. On October 7, 2025, Evan Miller, a 33-year-old yacht broker from Johannesburg, had invited 3 longtime friends for what was meant to be a celebratory weekend sail. Clara Hayes, a 31-year-old graphic designer, Matt Bennett, a 35-year-old engineer, and Sophie Tran, a 29-year-old photographer, had all known Evan since university. The 4 had maintained their friendship through careers, relationships, and the general chaos of adult life, making these annual trips a sacred tradition. Evan had recently closed a deal on a luxury yacht worth just over 1 million rand, and he wanted to christen it properly with the people who mattered most. The morning had started promisingly enough. Weather forecasts predicted calm seas and mild temperatures, perfect conditions for a leisurely cruise along the coast. The yacht, a sleek 42-foot vessel with a reinforced fiberglass hull and modern navigation equipment, seemed more than capable of handling the journey. Evan had plotted a route that would take them past some scenic points without venturing too far from established shipping lanes. The group departed from the harbor around noon, spirits high and coolers packed with enough food and drinks to last the weekend. By late afternoon, they had anchored in a relatively shallow area, perhaps 8 meters deep, where Evan insisted the views were spectacular. Matt had brought fishing gear and began cleaning some bait fish he had caught earlier, tossing the discarded guts and scales overboard without much thought. The practice was common enough among recreational fishermen, though it carried risks in these particular waters. The group settled into an easy rhythm, with Clara sunbathing on deck, Sophie capturing photos of the coastline, and Evan fiddling with the yacht's sound system. What happened next unfolded with shocking speed. Sophie, who had been standing near the stern, later recalled seeing a dark shadow pass beneath the yacht, something massive and deliberate in its movement. Before she could process what she had seen, the entire vessel lurched violently to one side. The impact was tremendous, as though they had struck a submerged rock, except they were in open water. Evan shouted something about checking the hull, but his words were drowned out by a second, even more powerful collision. The Great White, estimated by investigators to be between 4.5 and 5 meters in length and weighing well over a ton, had been drawn to the area by the scent trail of discarded bait fish. The shark's electroreceptors, sensitive enough to detect the faint electrical fields generated by living creatures, had likely picked up on the yacht's movement and vibrations in the water. What the animal interpreted as threat, prey, or simple territorial aggression would never be known, but its response was devastating. The third strike cracked the hull. Evan had been trying to start the engine when water began flooding into the cabin with horrifying speed. Clara screamed as the yacht tilted sharply, sending loose equipment sliding across the deck. Matt grabbed for a life jacket but lost his footing as another impact rocked the vessel. The shark was circling now, returning again and again, its massive body slamming against the compromised structure with enough force to splinter reinforced fiberglass. Sophie made a split-second decision that would save her life. As the yacht began to capsize, she grabbed the nearest floating object, a large cooler that had broken free from its lashings, and jumped into the water on the opposite side from where she had last seen the shadow. The cold hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath and sending shock through her system. She kicked hard, putting distance between herself and the sinking yacht, her hands locked around the cooler in a death grip. The distress call that Evan managed to send before the radio died was brief and garbled. Emergency services received only fragments about a shark and hull damage before the transmission cut off abruptly. By the time rescue teams triangulated the approximate location and dispatched boats, night had fallen, and search conditions had deteriorated significantly. Sophie drifted for nearly 12 hours, fighting hypothermia and exhaustion in equal measure. She later described hearing splashing sounds in the darkness, though whether it was the shark, wreckage, or her own imagination, she could not say with certainty. Rescue teams found her at dawn, barely conscious and severely dehydrated, still clinging to the cooler. Her friends were never recovered, despite extensive searches that continued for days afterward. Investigators pieced together the sequence of events from Sophie's testimony, GPS data from the yacht's last known position, and physical evidence recovered from the wreckage. The conclusion pointed to a combination of factors: the discarded bait creating an attractant, the yacht's position in shallow water within prime hunting territory, and the shark's natural aggressive response to what it may have perceived as competition or threat. Marine biologists noted that such sustained attacks on vessels were rare, but not unprecedented in areas with high great white populations. The incident became a case study in marine safety programs throughout South Africa and internationally. Authorities emphasized the importance of proper waste disposal, awareness of local predator populations, and the inherent risks of recreational boating in shark-inhabited waters. For Sophie Tran, the trauma proved insurmountable. She relocated to Pretoria within months, choosing a life as far from the ocean as geography would allow, and had not returned to the coast since. The Gulf Coast of Florida, stretching across hundreds of miles of warm, shallow waters, had long been recognized as prime bull shark territory. Unlike their oceanic cousins, bull sharks possessed a remarkable ability to tolerate fresh water, allowing them to venture into rivers, estuaries, and coastal shallows, where unsuspecting swimmers often congregated. The particular stretch of water off Clearwater, approximately 35 kilometers west of Tampa, was murky year-round due to tidal movements stirring up sediment from the sandy bottom. Visibility rarely exceeded 2 meters, creating conditions in which predators and prey existed in uncomfortable proximity, unaware of one another until contact was made. On June 14, 2022, a married couple had chartered a modest fishing boat for what was supposed to be a reconciliatory trip. Their relationship had been deteriorating for months, with arguments becoming more frequent and volatile. The husband, a 38-year-old construction manager whose temper had worn thin, suggested the outing as a way to escape their routine conflicts. His wife, Laura Bennett, a 34-year-old elementary school teacher, agreed reluctantly, hoping the change of scenery might ease the tension that had settled over their household like fog. The morning started poorly. The husband had been drinking beer since they departed from the marina at dawn, his mood souring with each passing hour despite the pleasant weather. Laura tried to maintain peace, focusing on the fishing gear and avoiding topics that might trigger another argument. By midday, the temperature had climbed into the low 30s, and the boat sat anchored in roughly 4 meters of water, close enough to shore that other vessels were visible in the distance. The argument that erupted was about something trivial, though later neither could recall exactly what sparked it. What began as snide remarks escalated into shouting, with the husband's face reddening as his voice grew louder. Laura told him he was being ridiculous, that his behavior was ruining yet another attempt at fixing things. In response, he grabbed her arm and, in a moment of reckless fury that he would spend years regretting, shoved her over the side of the boat. Laura hit the water with a splash that sent ripples across the calm surface. The warm Gulf water, heated to nearly 28 degrees Celsius by the summer sun, enveloped her immediately. She surfaced, sputtering and disoriented, her wetsuit providing some buoyancy as she trod water. The husband leaned over the railing, his anger already giving way to shock at what he had done, when Laura's expression changed from fury to pure terror. The bull shark, a mature female measuring approximately 2.7 meters, had been patrolling the shallows in search of stingrays and small fish. Bull sharks are notoriously aggressive, with testosterone levels higher than those of any other shark species, making them unpredictable and dangerous. The sudden splash and erratic movements in the water prompted an investigation. Within seconds of Laura entering the water, the shark had closed the distance. The first strike came from below. Laura felt something massive slam into her left leg, followed by searing pain as teeth punctured through the neoprene wetsuit and into her calf. She screamed, thrashing instinctively, which only intensified the shark's interest. The animal shook its head violently, the way predators do to tear flesh from bone, before releasing and circling back for another pass. The husband, sobering instantly from his alcohol-induced haze, screamed her name and lunged for a life ring. He threw it toward her, but his hands were shaking so badly that it landed short, Lara was struggling to stay afloat, blood blooming in the water around her leg in dark clouds. The shark circled, its dorsal fin cutting through the surface in a lazy arc that belied the danger. It snapped at the water near her, testing, evaluating whether to commit to a full attack. A tour boat operating about 50 meters away had noticed the commotion. The captain, a veteran of Gulf waters who recognized the signs of a shark encounter immediately, gunned the engine and closed the distance while his crew grabbed emergency equipment. One of them threw a rescue line that landed within Lara's reach. She grabbed it with both hands, her injured leg useless beneath her. The shark made another pass, its jaws snapping within inches of the boat's hull as the crew hauled Lara aboard. The husband watched helplessly, still holding the life ring, as his wife was pulled from the water, leaving a trail of blood. The shark circled 3 more times before finally retreating into deeper water, apparently deciding the meal was not worth the effort. Lara collapsed on the deck of the rescue boat, her leg bleeding heavily. But the wound was not immediately life-threatening. The bite had missed major arteries by centimeters. Paramedics met them at the dock, and she was rushed to a nearby hospital, where surgeons spent hours cleaning and closing the wound. She would walk again, though with a permanent scar and a limp that worsened in cold weather. Authorities investigated the incident and ultimately classified it as a combination of human recklessness and natural predator behavior. The husband was questioned extensively but faced no charges, as Lara refused to press charges despite their marriage ending within months. Marine biologists used the case to emphasize that bull sharks were particularly dangerous in shallow, murky water, where their poor eyesight and aggressive nature made them prone to investigative bites that could prove fatal. Warning signs were reinforced along that section of coastline, reminding visitors that the Gulf's warm, inviting waters concealed apex predators that viewed humans not as prey, but as potential threats worthy of aggressive investigation. The central coast of Oregon, where rocky headlands met stretches of sandy beach, had always maintained an uneasy relationship with the Pacific Ocean. The waters off Lincoln City, roughly 130 kilometers southwest of Portland, remained frigid year-round, rarely climbing above 14 degrees Celsius even in summer. Cold currents swept down from Alaska, bringing nutrients that attracted seals, sea lions, and occasionally the great white sharks that hunted them. Fog was common in late August, rolling in thick blankets that reduced visibility to mere meters and muffled sound in an eerie way that locals had learned to respect. Aidan Clark, a 19-year-old lifeguard entering his 4th summer of service, had grown up in a house within walking distance of the beach. His father worked in commercial fishing, and Aidan had learned to read the ocean's moods from an early age. He understood rip currents, recognized dangerous surf conditions, and knew when weather patterns signaled trouble. His supervisors considered him one of their most reliable guards, someone who took the responsibility seriously without the bravado that sometimes plagued younger staff members. On the morning of August 28, 2024, fog had settled over the coastline before dawn. Visibility extended 30 meters at best, and the surf was moderate, with waves reaching chest height in the impact zone. The protocol stated that lifeguards should discourage swimming in such conditions, but enforcement was difficult when tourists insisted on entering the water. Aidan reported to his station at 7 in the morning, taking up position in the elevated chair with binoculars and a radio. Around 9:30, movement beyond the surf zone caught his attention. Through the fog, he spotted what appeared to be a small figure struggling in the water, arms waving irregularly. The swimmer seemed to be drifting parallel to shore, caught in a rip current that was pulling them away from the beach. Aidan radioed the incident to his supervisor, grabbed his rescue board, and entered the water without hesitation. The water was shockingly cold despite his wetsuit. He paddled hard, his board cutting through the waves as he made his way toward the struggling swimmer. As he closed the distance, he realized it was a child, a boy who could not have been more than 10 years old. Panicking and taking in water with each breath, the kid had wandered far beyond where he should have been, likely caught by the current and unable to fight his way back. Aidan reached him within minutes. He pulled the boy onto the rescue board, quickly checking his condition while trying to calm him. The child was coherent but terrified, gasping that he could not feel his legs from the cold. Aidan told him to hold onto the board and started paddling back toward shore, positioning himself to push the board ahead while swimming behind it. That was when witnesses on the beach saw the water around them churn violently. Several people would later describe seeing something large and dark surface briefly before disappearing again. One woman reported seeing a fin, though others disputed this detail in the chaos and poor visibility. What was certain was that something had struck from below with enough force to send both Aidan and the boy into the water. Aidan reacted instantly. He grabbed the child and threw him back onto the board with strength born of pure adrenaline. He shouted something that witnesses could not make out over the sound of the surf, pushing the board toward shore with everything he had. The boy, frozen in shock, clung to the board as it began moving away from Aiden. A lifeguard boat that had been dispatched when Aiden first radioed was approaching from the south. The crew saw the boy on the board and moved to intercept him, pulling him aboard within seconds. They scanned the water for Aiden but saw nothing except disturbed water and foam. One crew member dove in, searching the immediate area, but the visibility underwater was nearly zero in the murky, sediment-filled water. The boy was brought to shore hypothermic but physically unharmed. Paramedics wrapped him in thermal blankets while he stammered out what he remembered. He told them that Aiden had pushed him toward the board just before something hit them from underneath, something that felt like a car slamming into them. He said Aiden had gone under and never came back up. Search and rescue operations continued throughout the day and into the following morning. Dive teams combed the area, but the currents and poor visibility made the effort extremely difficult. On the third day, divers recovered physical evidence roughly 200 meters offshore in deeper water. Marine biologists examining the evidence confirmed that a great white shark, likely measuring 4 to 4.5 meters, had been responsible for the attack. The conclusion devastated the small coastal community. Aiden's colleagues gathered at the lifeguard station, many unable to process that someone so familiar with the ocean could be taken so suddenly. His parents released a statement thanking the community for their support but requesting privacy as they processed their loss. The boy's family struggled with overwhelming guilt, despite everyone insisting that no one was at fault except perhaps the fog and terrible timing. A memorial service was held 2 weeks later on the beach where Aiden had worked. Hundreds attended, including lifeguards from up and down the coast who came to honor one of their own. His name was added to a memorial plaque that listed first responders who had died in the line of duty. The plaque was mounted near the main lifeguard station, where tourists and locals passed it daily throughout the summer months. Local authorities revised their protocols following the incident. Solo rescues in low visibility conditions were prohibited, and backup response times were shortened. Additional training focused on shark awareness, though officials acknowledged that attacks remained extremely rare and virtually impossible to predict. The changes were implemented not out of fear, but out of respect for what Aiden's death had revealed about the risks lifeguards faced in waters where apex predators hunted. The boy, whose name was never publicly released, continued to receive counseling for years afterward. He carried the knowledge that someone had died saving him, a weight that shaped his adolescence in profound ways. Aiden Clark remained a hero in the community's memory, someone who had done exactly what he was trained to do when it mattered most. Seychelles Archipelago, scattered across the Indian Ocean roughly 1,600 kilometers east of mainland Africa, consisted of 115 islands surrounded by some of the deepest, clearest water on the planet. The outer islands, far from the tourist resorts and developed beaches, offered access to open ocean environments where the seafloor dropped away into abyssal depths within a few hundred meters of shore. These waters were home to pelagic species that rarely ventured close to land, including the oceanic white-tip shark, a species known among marine researchers for its bold, curious, and occasionally aggressive behavior toward divers. Elena Morales, a 32-year-old marine biologist from Barcelona, had traveled to the region as part of a research project studying midwater fish populations and their feeding patterns. Her work required extended time in open water, suspended in the blue zone where visibility extended in all directions, with no visual reference points except the occasional passing fish. It was disorienting work that demanded excellent buoyancy control and mental discipline. Elena had logged over 500 dives in her career, many of them in similarly challenging conditions, and felt confident in her abilities. On the morning of March 22, 2023, she departed from her research vessel around 8 o'clock for a solo dive in open water, approximately 7 kilometers from the nearest island. The boat crew would monitor her position via GPS beacon and maintain visual contact with her marker buoy. Her objective was to tag small specimens of a particular midwater species for tracking, a task that required patience and precise movements to avoid startling the fish. The water temperature hovered around 27 degrees Celsius, comfortable enough that Elena wore only a thin wetsuit for protection against scrapes and sun exposure. She descended to about 15 meters, reached neutral buoyancy, and drifted in the current. The visibility exceeded 40 meters in every direction, that peculiar oceanic blue that seemed infinite and empty until something suddenly appeared within it. She carried a mesh collection bag containing several small fish she had already tagged along with her usual equipment: a dive knife, a waterproof notebook, and a tagging gun. She had been working for perhaps 30 minutes when she noticed the shadow. It appeared beneath her, rising slowly from the depths, a dark shape that resolved into a shark as it approached. Elena recognized it immediately as an oceanic whitetip, identifiable by its rounded first dorsal fin, with a white tip, and the distinctive white patches on its pectoral fins. The animal measured approximately 3 meters in length, a mature specimen that moved with the lazy confidence of an apex predator in its own territory. The shark began circling her, keeping about 5 meters away. Elena remained still, controlling her breathing to avoid appearing threatening or prey-like. Oceanic whitetips were known for their persistence and boldness, often investigating divers with a determination that bordered on aggression. Unlike reef sharks, which can be relatively predictable, whitetips operate in open water, where food sources are scarce and unpredictable, making them opportunistic and willing to test potential meals. The shark tightened its circle. Elena could see its eyes tracking her movements, that dead-eyed stare that revealed nothing of its intentions. Then, without warning, it lunged forward and grabbed the mesh collection bag hanging from her belt. The impact nearly knocked her regulator from her mouth as the shark shook the bag violently, the way a dog might shake a toy. A small, tagged fish spilled into the open water, attracting the shark's attention for a moment. Elena used the distraction to slowly reach for her dive knife, not to harm the animal, but to have something to defend herself if necessary. The shark released the bag and circled again, closer now, perhaps 3 meters away. It tested the bag again, snapping at the mesh and creating small tears in the material. Elena remained vertical in the water, a position that made her appear larger and less like the horizontal profile of struggling prey. For nearly 5 minutes, the encounter continued. The shark circled, lunged, and tested various pieces of Elena's equipment. It bit at the ropes connecting her gear, scraped against her dive tank, and repeatedly returned to investigate the mesh bag. Each time it approached, Elena gently pushed it away with the flat of her dive knife, never stabbing or threatening, just creating space. She maintained eye contact with the animal, a technique that sometimes deterred sharks by making it clear the potential prey was aware and alert. The shark made one final aggressive pass, coming close enough that Elena could see the parasites attached to its skin and count the rows of serrated teeth in its mouth. She pushed it away again, her heart hammering despite her outward calm. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the shark veered off and descended back into the depths, disappearing into the blue like a ghost. Elena immediately began her ascent, following proper decompression procedures despite her adrenaline urging her to rush. She surfaced near her marker buoy, where the boat crew quickly retrieved her. Once aboard, she sat on the deck for several minutes, shaking from the adrenaline dump before she could articulate what had happened. The crew examined her equipment, noting the tears in the mesh bag and scrape marks on various pieces of gear. The incident reinforced several critical lessons that Elena shared with her research team afterward. Open ocean diving carries inherent risks that cannot be eliminated through training or equipment. Oceanic whitetips, while not typically deadly to humans, were bold enough to push boundaries that could quickly escalate into genuine danger. Solo diving in such conditions, while sometimes necessary for research purposes, required constant awareness and the ability to remain calm during encounters that would terrify most people. Elena continued her research in the Seychelles, but protocols were updated to require at least one dive buddy for open water work. She had survived the encounter through a combination of training, experience, and luck. The shark had been investigating rather than hunting, a crucial distinction that had likely saved her life. The Gold Coast of Queensland, Australia, stretching roughly 60 kilometers along the southeastern corner of the state, had built its reputation on pristine beaches, consistent surf, and warm subtropical waters that attracted millions of tourists annually. The region's beaches transitioned quickly from shallow sandbars to deeper channels, creating ideal conditions for marine life and water sports enthusiasts alike. Tiger sharks, second only to great whites in terms of documented attacks on humans, patrolled these waters year-round, drawn by the abundant fish populations and occasional seal colonies that ventured south during winter months. Jake Thompson, a 28-year-old personal trainer from Brisbane, had developed an obsession with jet skiing over the previous 2 years. He owned a high-performance model capable of exceeding 100 kilometers per hour, and he spent most weekends carving through waves and pushing the limits of the machine. His social media presence reflected this passion, filled with videos of jumps, tight turns, and the occasional wipeout that he laughed off with the confidence of someone who believed himself invincible. On January 17, 2024, Jake loaded his jet ski onto a trailer and drove to a popular launch point near Surfers Paradise, arriving around 10 in the morning. The summer heat had already pushed temperatures into the low 30s and the water was warm, hovering around 26 degrees Celsius. Several fishing boats were visible offshore, their crews working the channels where bait fish congregated in massive schools. Jake noticed them but paid little attention, focused instead on getting onto the water and capturing footage for his latest video. He launched without incident and spent the first hour performing his usual routines: high-speed runs parallel to the beach, tight figure eights that sent spray flying, and occasional jumps off small waves that left him airborne for brief, exhilarating moments. Other jet skiers and boaters gave him space, recognizing his aggressive style as a boundary pusher. Around 11:30, Jake noticed increased activity from the fishing boats. Several had clustered together roughly 400 meters offshore, their crews pulling in nets and discarding bycatch into the water. The discarded fish, mostly small species deemed commercially worthless, created a chum slick that spread with the current. Jake thought nothing of it, steering his jet ski toward the area to film the boats from a closer angle. He was skimming across the surface at moderate speed when the shadow appeared beneath him. It materialized so quickly that his brain struggled to process what he was seeing. A massive shape, easily 3 meters long, rising from the depths with startling speed. Before Jake could react, the tiger shark broke the surface and struck the side of his jet ski with its snout. The impact was tremendous. The shark's jaws opened and clamped onto the fiberglass hull, teeth puncturing the material and creating a grinding sound that Jake would recall in nightmares for months afterward. The jet ski lurched violently to the left, nearly throwing him into the water as he fought to maintain his grip on the handlebars. The shark released and disappeared beneath the surface, leaving behind visible gouges in the hull. Jake's heart hammered as he tried to process what had just happened. He scanned the water around him, seeing nothing but his own wake and the disturbed surface where the shark had struck. For a few seconds, he considered racing back to shore, but pride and disbelief kept him hovering in place, convinced the encounter was over. Then the shark returned. It surged from beneath again, this time striking the rear of the jet ski with enough force to lift the back end partially out of the water. Jake felt the machine buck beneath him like a wild animal as the shark's jaws scraped along the underside, testing the strange object that had entered its territory. He gunned the throttle, accelerating hard, but the shark kept pace, circling and making short, aggressive rushes that forced him to adjust his position constantly. For nearly 10 minutes, the encounter continued. The tiger shark, drawn by the bait slick and possibly confused by the jet ski's vibrations and movement, treated the machine like potential prey or a competitor. It struck 3 more times, each impact sending shocks through Jake's arms and threatening his balance. He found himself forced into a pattern of acceleration, evasion, and sharp turns, trying to maintain distance while avoiding being thrown into the water, where he would be completely vulnerable. The fishing boats had noticed the commotion. One vessel changed course and began heading toward Jake, its crew recognizing the signs of a shark encounter. The approaching ship seemed to finally discourage the predator, which made one last pass before veering away and descending into deeper water, disappearing as suddenly as it had appeared. Jake immediately gunned the throttle and raced toward shore, not slowing until he reached the shallow water near the beach. His hands were shaking so badly that he could barely steer. He beached the jet ski and collapsed onto the sand, his legs weak and his breathing ragged. Other beachgoers gathered around asking if he was all right, while someone called emergency services. Paramedics arrived and checked him over, finding him physically unharmed, but clearly in shock. The jet ski, however, bore unmistakable evidence of the encounter. Deep gouges ran along both sides of the hull, some nearly puncturing through to the internal components. Tooth marks were clearly visible in several places, creating a pattern that marine experts later identified as consistent with a large tiger shark. Jake spent the rest of the day processing what had happened. The encounter had lasted only minutes, but felt like hours in his memory. The realization that he had been essentially helpless, that the shark could have easily capsized the jet ski and forced him into the water, left him shaken in a way that previous close calls never had. He recognized how quickly his confidence and experience had become irrelevant when faced with an apex predator operating in its own element. Within a week, Jake enrolled in shark safety workshops offered by local marine conservation groups. He learned about tiger shark behavior, feeding patterns, and how human activities such as fishing and water sports can lead to unexpected encounters. He stopped posting aggressive jet skiing videos and began using his social media presence to educate others about ocean safety and the importance of respecting marine wildlife. The damaged jet ski was eventually repaired, but Jake kept several of the most prominent tooth marks intact, mounted in clear resin, as a permanent reminder of the day when fun turned dangerous and humility replaced bravado. The Pacific Ocean, covering roughly 1/3 of the Earth's surface, contained depths and mysteries that continued to elude comprehensive scientific understanding despite decades of technological advancement. The region, approximately 800 kilometers west of the California coast, where the continental shelf dropped away into abyssal plains exceeding 4,000 meters in depth, remained largely unmapped at high resolution. Cold currents from the north collided with warmer flows from the south, creating nutrient upwellings that supported complex food chains from microscopic plankton to the largest predators on the planet. On September 3, 2025, the USS Fitzgerald, a research vessel operating under contract with the United States Navy, was conducting routine sonar mapping operations in international waters. The mission objective was to update seafloor topography data for submarine navigation, work that required slow, methodical passes across designated grid sections. Lieutenant Mark Reynolds, a 34-year-old sonar technician from San Diego, had been stationed aboard the vessel for 6 months and found the work tedious, but occasionally rewarding when unexpected geological features appeared on the displays. The morning had been unremarkable. Weather conditions were moderate with 3-meter swells and scattered clouds. The vessel maintained a steady course at 8 knots, with its sonar arrays active and continuously collecting data. The crew of 43 included scientists, technicians, and support personnel, most of whom were below deck attending to various duties or resting during their off-shift hours. Around 10:15, Reynolds noticed an anomaly on his sonar display. A large object was moving near the surface, roughly 200 meters from the vessel's starboard side. Its acoustic signature did not match known whales or large fish, and its movement pattern suggested deliberate navigation rather than passive drifting. Reynolds called his supervisor over to review the reading. Initial estimates placed the object at approximately 6 meters in length, though acoustic analysis carried inherent uncertainties. The supervisor authorized Reynolds to track the contact and record detailed data, noting that unusual marine life encounters were valuable for Navy databases. Reynolds adjusted his equipment settings and began logging the object's movements. Over the next 10 minutes, the contact approached the vessel. Reynolds refined his estimates and, with growing unease, realized that the object was significantly larger than he had initially calculated. Correcting for water temperature and acoustic propagation, he revised his assessment. The creature measured at least 20 feet, possibly longer. He reported this to the bridge, where the officer on watch ordered the crew to prepare for a possible visual sighting. Then, without warning, the water along the starboard hull erupted. Several crew members on deck shouted in alarm as something massive surfaced alongside the vessel, close enough that spray from its movement reached the railing. Those who witnessed it would later struggle to articulate the sheer size of what they had seen. A great white shark so enormous that it challenged accepted records and scientific understanding of the species' maximum size. The shark's body measured at least 6 meters from snout to tail, possibly more, with a girth suggesting a weight exceeding 2 tons. Its dorsal fin stood nearly a meter tall, cutting through the water like a steel blade. The animal circled the vessel once, maintaining a distance of roughly 15 meters, its dark eye visible as it passed. Then it accelerated and approached the hull directly. The impact, when it came, sent vibrations through the steel plating that crew members felt in their feet. The shark had struck the hull with its snout, not biting, but testing, as sharks often do when investigating unfamiliar objects. It scraped along the side of the vessel, its rough skin creating a sound like tearing fabric, amplified by the metal. Deep scratches appeared in the paint, revealing bare steel underneath. Lieutenant Reynolds, watching through sonar and now through a porthole, observed the creature's behavior with a mixture of fear and fascination. The shark was not attacking in any predatory sense. Its movements were exploratory, curious, almost methodical. It circled twice more, each pass bringing it closer, before suddenly changing direction and diving sharply. The bridge officer ordered the deployment of underwater acoustic deterrents, high-frequency pulses designed to deter marine life from approaching vessels. The equipment activated with a series of clicks and hums that transmitted through the water. The shark's response was immediate and unexpected. It paused mid-dive, hovered for several seconds as if considering the sound, then executed a sharp turn and accelerated away from the vessel with startling speed. Sonar tracked the creature as it descended rapidly, dropping below 200 meters in less than a minute before disappearing into the deeper water beyond the equipment's effective range. The encounter lasted 15 minutes from first contact to final departure, but it left the crew shaken and uncertain about what they had witnessed. Navy scientists reviewing the data afterward found themselves grappling with uncomfortable questions. Great white sharks were known to reach approximately 6 meters in length, but confirmed measurements of specimens this size were extremely rare. More disturbing was the creature's behavior, which suggested a level of awareness and deliberate investigation that exceeded typical shark responses to vessels. The way it had reacted to the acoustic deterrence implied not fear but evaluation, as though it had weighed the stimulus and chosen to depart rather than simply fleeing on instinct. The scratches on the hull were photographed, measured, and analyzed. Marine biologists confirmed they were consistent with sharkskin abrasion, and the spacing suggested an animal of remarkable size. The Navy classified the encounter report and added it to a growing database of unusual marine life interactions, though details were not released to the public. Lieutenant Reynolds found himself unable to shake the memory of watching that enormous shape pass beneath the vessel, powerful and ancient, moving through its domain with an authority that made humanity's steel ships seem temporary and fragile. The ocean, he realized, still contained wonders and terrors that decades of scientific study had only begun to document. The apex predators that hunted in those depths operated according to rules and intelligence that remained largely unknown, reminding submariners and sailors alike that the ocean belonged to creatures who had perfected survival long before humans ever ventured beyond sight of land.